Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our Talks with Walt, as we are calling our reading through the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We are in the Calamus section, and we turn now to what is probably the most anthologized of all the poems of the Calamus section. I saw in Louisiana a live oak growing. Now, you'll want to remember, of course, in our earlier conversations that we've spoken about that at the age of 29, Whitman, from February to May of 1848, was in Louisiana and New Orleans, and there will be, there in that moment, a certain kind of thing that will happen that, well, there'll be a number of things that happen, but certainly one of those will be represented here. Now, some have seen this as the most autobiographical of all the poems in Leaves of Grass, and there's huge debate about this. Now, the assumption is that you've been with us for our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, Talks with Walt. Everything from the inscriptions poems all the way up through the last poem that we did, Behold This Swarthy Face. Now, our Nortons, as we always refer to some background information, will tell us that two manuscripts of this poem show little revision except for the final line arrangement. It is numbered 11 in the Roman numeral series and number 20 of the 1860 Calamus group, receiving its title and final text in 1867. Nortons will add this because this is such a controversial poem. Despite its intensity, biographical significance is not a necessary inference. There's a whole lot of scholars that will debate whether that's true or not. Let's enjoy the poem itself. I saw in Louisiana a live oak growing. All alone stood it, and the moss hung down from the branches. Without any companion it grew there, uttering joyous leaves of dark green. And its look, rude, unbending, lusty, made me think of myself. But I wondered how it could utter joyous leaves standing alone there, without its friend near, for I knew I could not. And I broke off a twig with a certain number of leaves upon it, and twined around it a little moss, and brought it away, and I placed it inside in my room. It is not needed to remind me as of my own dear friends, for I believe lately I think of little else than of them. Yet it remains to me a curious token. It makes me think of manly love, for all that. And though the live oak glistens there in Louisiana, solitary in a wide, flat space, uttering joyous leaves all its life without a friend, a lover near, I know very well I could not. Now, the poem will begin with a construction that we've seen a number of times. Think of Song of Myself, passage 10. I saw the marriage of the trapper here. I saw, and we'll see this a number of times, right, in Leaves of Grass, where Whitman will be almost like in language trying to show us what photography will do, of course, during his lifetime, just beginning, and of course, after that, all the time. What does great poetry do? Well, it shows instead of tells, and so he'll tell us here, I saw in Louisiana a live oak growing. Now, this idea of growth is obviously central to everything that's been happening in Leaves of Grass. Notice the idea of being all alone. We're going to come back to it in solitary. This is one of the most dominant ideas in all of Leaves of Grass. All alone stood it, and the moss hung down from the branches. Now, obviously, a whole lot's been made of the phallic imagery that's going on here, which is why, of course, this poem has been read often as homoerotic and therefore somehow biographical or autobiographical. I'm going to leave a lot of that up to you in our reading of this poem, though. We will see it for sure as a symbol, a phallic symbol, no question. Without any companion, it grew there, uttering joyous leaves of dark green. Obviously, the leaves were in Leaves of Grass, dark green. Obviously, we have all kinds of ideas about that. And the dark green takes us back to Song of Myself, passage 6, right? And its look, notice we have three of these all together. Rude, that is to say simple. Unbending, that is to say strong. Lusty, obviously, will equate then a certain kind of sexual rendering of this set of lines. Made me think of myself. And of course, Song of Myself, Make Me Think of Myself comes together. But and then there's the shift. I wondered how he could utter joyous leaves, back to the same line again, standing alone there without its friend near, for I knew I could not. So this is that identification with the oak in Louisiana that he saw, and of course himself as well. And now we're going to get a very interesting moment. I broke off a twig with a certain number of leaves upon it. By the way, this word twig gets used 3 times in Calamus, fascinating, a number of leaves upon it. and twined around it a little moss. Now, obviously, you can see here where we're taking one symbol and creating another symbol out of it. Hey, do you remember this word twined as it relates to Song of Myself, passage 15? Do you remember this? On the piazza walked three matrons, stately and friendly, with twined arms. That idea of intertwining is one that, and we cannot help but think about Milton's Paradise Lost and his description of the serpent intertwining around the tree, right? And brought it away, and I placed it inside in my room. It is not needed to remind me as of my dear friends. And then this parenthetic, for I believe lately I think of little else than of them. Notice it's not friend, it's friends, right? It's plural. Yet, it remains to me a curious token, and this word token is a central understanding in all of our reading of Leaves of Grass. That is to say, one thing representing something else, right? A token, he says, a curious token, and obviously we've talked about the word curious and how important that is. It makes me think of manly love. Now, of course, this idea of manly love, adhesiveness, is everything we've been working with in Calamus, all of the preceding poems. We've made observations about his celebration of manly love. For all that, and though the live oak glistens, interestingly, glistening is used in several times in Leaves of Grass. This is the only time the word glisten is used in all of Leaves of Grass. They are in Louisiana, solitary, back to the all alone again, solitary in a wide, flat space, uttering joyous leaves. The third time that phrase gets used in this, all its life without a friend. Notice in the third line, it was without any companion, a lover near. I know very well that I could not. I could not what? Obviously, I could not enjoy my life or endure my life without a friend. Now, note, this is a 13-line poem, and many have pointed out that it does have the feel of a sonnet in some ways. Well, what's our message here? Well, I think that one of the clear messages is that the artist obviously needs companionship to grow, right? And as well, there's always a tension between the artist's need to be alone, that is to create, and to be together, that is to share the creative venture, right? So there's that tension always there. To be, obviously the symbolism of the oak is a phallic symbol. I mean, it's not a big deal to us today, but man, in the time when this poem was published, it was pretty controversial because it was clear the game that Whitman was playing, right? And the twining with the moss and all of that. At 3A, think of all the I saw references and poems in Leaves of Grass. Think of Portrait as the artist as a young man and the tension that's always playing there, as we've spoken about at learnstrong.net. How about T.S. Eliot's Four Quartets? Guys, I've said to you many times that you can't really read Four Quartets without a real appreciation of Whitman. And I mean, just think about passage 2 of East Coker. That was a way of putting it, not very satisfactory. A paraphrastic study in a worn-out poetical fashion, leaving one still with the intolerable blah, 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 blah. I mean, there's this sense of trying to explain something that cannot be so easily explained. We certainly see it here. Finally, at 3B, what have you used as a token or as a reminder of something that really matters most to you? One or two of you are saying that your annotated version of Leaves of Grass has become that. I'm pleased to hear that. Thank you.